Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are past Thanksgiving. December is around the corner, and we still have two teams remaining in the high school football playoffs. They are the same two teams that got to this point last year. We will talk about what's in store for them. We will talk about how they got here, and we will talk about the third team that made it past Thanksgiving this year as well, as we gear up for another edition of the podcast. Thank you again for joining me. And so here we are, region final, state quarterfinals if you prefer. I prefer region finals because how can you go from region semifinals to not going to the region final? But that's quibbling. It's the fourth round of the playoffs. No matter what you call it, there are 16 teams that have gotten down to 8. We will find out who the final 4 are. Will we have 2 teams still playing for a spot in the championship game in 2 weeks? I think we have a pretty good chance. And we will talk about those chances right now. We will go out of order. I know I always say we start from the top to the bottom, but since we have only 3 teams to talk about and 1 team was eliminated, I want to talk about Tioga first, and then we can talk about Gunner and Collinsville as the teams that are still playing. So Tioga got to the region semifinals in 2A Division 1 in the Region 2 bracket, and they took on Marlin. Unfortunately, they did not continue their great run with a 46-14 loss. This was a game that was only 12-0 at halftime, but unfortunately, Tioga could not get anything going on offense until it was way too late after Marlin had gone up 25-0 heading to the third quarter. Heading to the fourth quarter, and that's when Tioga finally got on the board with about 7 minutes left. And then a crazy fourth quarter with 5 total touchdowns in the last 7 minutes after only 4 touchdowns through 3 quarters. And Marlin was able to hold off a potential comeback. And then add some scores at the end to make it look a little more lopsided than it was at the middle of the fourth quarter when it was a 25-8 margin. But Tioga definitely played well, at least defensively, shutting down a potent Marlin attack that ended up finishing with over 450 yards. But in the first half, they got some fumble recoveries, or they got a fumble recovery and 1 fumble went out of the end zone for a touchback. And they were hanging around. They just could not get anything going. They finished with about 225 yards, and that number was very low until those couple of late drives. In the fourth quarter. Hayden Hilliard finishes 20 of 41, passing for 198 yards with a touchdown and 2 interceptions. Austin Norwood, 7 catches for 142 yards. Sam Mott, 4 catches for 46 yards and a touchdown. Jonathan Hernandez, 7 carries for 36 yards and a touchdown. So Tioga in the first year, under a new coach with all the changes, all the uncertainty about the direction of the program. Once you have all these changes, and they're coming off, at that point they were coming off their best season since moving up to 11-man. They won 8 games. They won an outright district title undefeated. The only thing they hadn't done was win a playoff game, and then to get to this point where you get to a third playoff game with a new head coach in Zach Birdwell, a very good season, setting the bar for what this group can do going forward. Obviously, there's going to be some losses, a little more than the last couple of years, where you had all these underclassmen that were coming back after they made the playoffs 2 years ago in 2021. They went 5-5, lost in the first round, and you could just see the jump that they had made in a new coach under Chad Rogers, and you looked at that team and you said, well, look at all these guys that are sophomores that are contributing. There were some freshmen on that in that group, and the same thing last year. You had so many guys, that went 8-3 and say, okay, well, all these guys are back, and that didn't even include somebody like at quarterback with Hayden Hilliard, who had been hurt the last his sophomore and junior year, didn't even get to play, and he was going to be available for his senior year. So there's definitely going to be some key holes to fill. Obviously, quarterback being one of them. And you want to see how they handle this great success and what it means in terms of the realignment. It looks like this district, the district is probably going to stay the same. And again, this is a group where Tioga ended up sharing the top spot with Nakona. And I think obviously the expectations going into next year are, at minimum, a district title is probably not just a fair goal, but obviously one that they can assume to be in that mix. And then can you put together another, can you follow up this run with another deep run? And can you be in a game that you will accept in this game? It was competitive for the most part until things kind of got away at the end. And I think there's a good foundation there going forward. Obviously, like I said, got to see what happens with realignment. Got to see if they can fill the holes. Obviously, with their philosophy on offense, with the air raid, with spreading the ball around, they have a lot of options. You don't have to, if you lose a guy or two, it seems like there's another guy or two that the next week has stepped up. They've been very good about taking what opponents give them, and I think like I said, you have to look at without knowing, like, in the region who else is going to lose a ton of people, who graduates this and that. What happens when you become the favorite? Because, like I said, obviously the knock on Tioga was that they were good enough to make the playoffs. They hadn't shown an ability to win in the playoffs. Now are people going to say, okay, well, this is a team that can make a run? How do they handle the expectations? How much better can they be in year two? If this was what year one was capable, and I had said all season, you could just see them getting better in what they were doing and what people's roles were as the season went on, because it was all new and new coach, trying to just adjust to everything for the first time, and they had a pretty good schedule. They had some close games that they lost that I think, if this was next year, they probably win those games, just because they were early and they were still trying to figure stuff out, or they would have been closer in games. Not that they would have necessarily won, but they would have had better showings just because they knew what they were doing, and were more comfortable in that. So that's going to be obviously the big thing with them for year two is, can you maintain this type of success where you are one of the last 16 teams playing, and you have gotten to Thanksgiving again, to kind of make that sort of the standard for where you think the program is going to be, especially with the fact that when we talk about realignment in Tioga, they had that surge of growth that took them from 6-man to 2A Division II to 2A Division I in the span of a couple of realignment cycles. It was literally like, hey, this cycle they're in 6-man, then they moved to 11-man 2A Division II, and then the next one after that they were in 2A Division One. They've been here for a little bit. They're going to be here for the next one. But there's a decent chance if the growth continues in that portion of Grayson County, and they could find themselves in 3A. Obviously not this next time in the 2024 realignment, but the 2026 realignment could be a close call. So to establish your ability to win at this level and then make that jump is obviously going to make it easier because you're just following that success up. So that's going to be something to watch for with them as well. Can they maintain this as the possibility of them moving to 3A in for I guess that would be the 2026 season. That could be a real possibility depending on the growth in that portion of the county. So again, a great season for Tioga. Unfortunately, they weren't able to keep it going and get to December. Although technically one of our teams is not playing in December. And we'll talk about them in a second. But since we are talking about the teams that are still playing, we'll work our way down. And of course, that's the Gunner Tigers. In 3A Division II, Region 2, that final has them taking on Jacksboro. Gunner 13-0 after they won 45-0 against Comanche. And Jacksboro advanced, and they are 13-0 after they won 49-48 in overtime against Holiday. So to recap, last week first with Gunner. So I kind of was in the middle. I said, I think this is probably going to be their toughest opponent. Don't be surprised. It was only 3-0 after the first quarter. It was a 24-0 game at halftime. And it was Gunner's toughest game so far of the playoffs, but they still won 45-0. They still allowed under 200 yards. It was 170 yards, including 35 carries for 65 yards, 9 first downs, forced 4 turnovers, and I don't want to say amazingly, it was another typical Gunner game. They get their 6th shutout in 7 games after giving up the touchdown last week against City View. And I would imagine, you hate to say once you get down 24-0, which is 3 scores, if you go for 2 every time, how does that, if you're playing a team that has only given up that many points once all season, what are the odds that the game is over at that point? But I will say, this was an effort that took, a full effort, because most of these games, like we've said with Gunner, is it's over at halftime. Gunner goes into the locker room at halftime and it's 48-0 or 54-0, and they just try to get the game over with. This was obviously a game where Gunner had to go into the second half and play its starters, and obviously we were wondering when was that going to happen, because this was probably the point in the region semifinals. Hey, we've got to be ready to go for a full game because the games are going to be tighter and they're going to be tougher. Now, going from 83-6 to 45-0 is obviously closing the gap. But it still shows how dominant Gunner can be. Walker Overman, 10 of 18 passing for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran 9 times for 39 yards and a score. Jace Martin, 4 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. Kanan Lemberg, his lone catch was a 30-yard touchdown. Jake Rathbone, 7 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown. Braden Hinton added a touchdown run. Cam Doty had a 45-yard interception return for a score, and Preston Tarpley kicked a field goal of 27 yards in the first quarter. And again, you didn't really feel like it was in doubt, but again, it was good to see them get tested, because I think obviously definitely from here on out, you were talking about probably facing 3 undefeated teams. If you're able to go all the way, you're going to be facing some really if we leveled up to a certain point from the second round to the third round, we're definitely leveling up from the region semifinals to the region final with Jacksboro. And so one, let's talk about Jacksboro just being here. Unfortunately, the script has been in this region, Gunner plays Holiday. And so I was of the opinion that I wanted to see Jacksboro, just for a sheer change of pace. If Holiday had won this game, it would have been the third straight year that Gunner and Holiday would have played in the region final. It would have been 5 of the last 7 years Gunner and Holiday would have met in the region final, and I believe it's 6 of the last 7 years they would have met in the playoffs. And I like different. I know everybody loves the rivalry, especially when we talk about what could potentially happen in the state semifinals. But the fact that we have this matchup, Gunner versus Jacksboro, in the 3A Division II Region 2 final, which is 7 p.m. on Friday at C.H. Collins in Denton, I'm excited to see this game. Yeah, 13-0 versus 13-0. This is a rematch from last year as well, so no matter if Holiday would have won, it would have been a rematch. Now, you say you don't like to see, Gunner beat up on the same team. So last year, Gunner won this game 48-7. And I was at that game last year as well. And I will say, one, that score does not lend you to think, okay, this is going to be a game. But a lot of the kids are back for Jacksboro. It's a lot of the same kids. And obviously they are better. They have taken that leap. They were an 8-3 team coming into that matchup last year in the second round. Obviously they're undefeated. They've won some close games. They've found ways to win. This game against Holiday, no exception. They're down late. They had to score. I think it was like maybe 30-something-ish seconds left. They scored a touchdown and the 2-point conversion just to force the overtime. It may have been even closer. I think it may have been with like 6 seconds left or something. I mean, it was super late in this game. They were driving. They had to score. They had to get the 2-point conversion just to force overtime. They did. Then in the overtime, Holiday goes first and scores, kicks the extra point. Jacksboro scores on their possession, goes for the 2-point conversion and the win, and they get it. So they've been aggressive. They're averaging close to 50 points a game. If you want to play a comparative score game, you can look at they did play Comanche and they only won that game 30-22, but they also played Bells and they won that game 45-6. And obviously Gunner played Bells in district and the district opener, and that game was 64-6. So I'm not saying that Jacksboro's the better team. I just think I think this is a step up from Comanche. I think this is a team that's going to sling it around. They did against Holiday. I think they're capable of running the ball too, but I think they want to throw it around. They did last year against Gunner, and they did have some success. I know, like I said, the score doesn't look it, but they did have some success. They're having their best season ever since 2001 was the last time they made it this far. They haven't had this many wins in a season since 1971. They've won as many games this year as the previous 2 seasons combined. You have a lot of these guys that are, seniors that are 3-year starters, and this is the run of their lives. And so I'm really excited to see. This game. If it was, no offense to Holiday, we've been there, we've done that, and unfortunately, none of those games have really been a game. I think this has a chance to be fun for a little bit. I think much like with Comanche last week. I think it's going to be interesting, and to see how Gunner responds again. Especially with the fact that the winner of this game in the semifinals is going to play the Canadian Wall winner. And much like people in Region 2 were not excited to see Gunnar Holiday as another rematch, Canadian Wall has been that in Region 1, and Canadian has won, basically has dominated the region, much like Gunnar has. And of course, if Gunnar and Canadian win, this will be the 7th time in 8 seasons that Canadian and Gunnar will play, with the lone exception of 2021, when Lubbock Roosevelt was able to sneak in there. Canadian was on the other side of the bracket and lost, and Lubbock Roosevelt took advantage, and Gunnar beat them pretty well. So that's looming. And I don't want to say that this could be a look-ahead situation, but kids are kids, people are people. You know it's coming. You know Canadian's like, we're going to beat Wall and we're going to play Gunnar again. And Gunnar's like, we're going to beat Jacksboro and we're going to play Canadian again. And that's going to be awesome because you probably have the 2 best teams in the state there. Although, again, I would love to see Wall because we haven't seen Wall yet, but that's not how things have played out since Gunnar went on this run in 2016. The semifinals have always been, Gunner's trying to win the region for the 8th straight year, and every time they've gotten to the semifinals, except for one, it's been Canadian. So I think everybody in the state, after last season ended, after last year's Canadian Gunner game ended, with a 1-point win and a very late touchdown and a come from behind Gunner win, and with all the pieces that both have coming back, everybody wanted to fast forward to the state semifinals. So you hope Gunner's not looking ahead saying, well, we're just gonna be ready to go against Canadian. So that may factor in. Whereas I think Jacksboro has no reason to look ahead. They are fully in. We want to be the team that knocks off what Gunner has done all season. They want some revenge from last year because I'm sure they thought last year they had a pretty good team. They just got stuck in Gunner's half of the bracket, and they had to face him in the second round. So I think this has a chance again to be a nice test, and I think for what Canadian could potentially bring to the table, I think this is a good game to play ahead of that, just from a stylistic approach for Gunner's defense. And again, if you tell me, Gunner wins this game 42-0 or 35-0 or 42-7, I would totally believe it. If they win 48-7 again, I would totally believe it. But I'm excited to see this game on Friday at 7:00 at CH Collins for the 3A Division II Region 2 final between Gunner versus Jacksboro. And then down in back in the 2A level, we have Collinsville still playing. Again, they get back to this point for the 2A Division II Region 2 final, and they're taking on Albany, and this is a rematch of last year in the region final. This is 7 p.m. on Thursday at Iowa Park. Collinsville comes in at 12-1. They won last week 50-12 against Roscoe, and Albany is 13-0. And obviously everybody paying attention to their score last week. They won 19-14 against Munster. So that was obviously a shocking score. And so we'll talk about all that, but we'll obviously get to what Collinsville did last week first. We'll recap that. So 50-12. Again, very similar to Gunner in the respect of they've been dominating everybody except for Cooper was the only team that they had lost to, and Cooper had played, had got to the region semifinals, so it's not like there was a fluke loss. But they've basically done exactly what they did last year. That was the only game they've lost. They're back in the region final. Roscoe was a different opponent, and Coach Patterson talked about they have some size. They have some people they lean on, and for the most part, Collinsville was able to shut them down again. My story about them to preview this game was about the Collinsville defense and kind of how it has been overlooked because they put up huge numbers on offense. They've scored, they're scoring in the 50s and the 60s and putting up these big numbers. that sometimes you kind of forget, hey, the other guys are doing pretty well on that side of the ball. And again, the case here, it's 21-0 at halftime. Again, that still is a reachable. You look up the scoreboard, you don't feel that that's a game that's out of your control. And Collinsville doesn't give up any points in the first half. They give up essentially through three quarters they only gave up one. They had one bad play. They gave up an 85-yard touchdown after they went and scored on the opening possession. So it was still a 3-score game when Roscoe got on the board. But then again, they do what they do. They continue to dominate, especially through the air. They go up 37-6 heading to the fourth quarter. They tack on 2 more touchdowns before Roscoe throws in a touchdown at the end to make it look a little bit better when it's 50-6 in the middle of the fourth quarter. So and again, they just spread the ball out so well that you just really cannot focus on one guy, and if you do, everybody else will hurt you. And again, that's the case this week. Logan Jenkins, 25 of 41 passing, 356 yards, 5 touchdowns. Carter Scott, 10 catches for 151 yards and 3 touchdowns. All of them in the second half. I will point out. And Colin Barnes, 4 catches for 95 yards, and he had it wasn't a touchdown, it was a conversion pass to return for 2 points. Rylan Newman, 4 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. Parker Wells had a touchdown catch. He also led on the ground with 10 carries for 54 yards. Jenkins added a touchdown run. He had 9 carries for 33 yards. Reed Patterson scored on the ground. And again, we talk about them, almost 500 yards again, no turnovers, very few penalties. They've been on a roll. They've been on a mission. They knew with everybody coming back that they were good enough to get back to the region final. So they're going to play Albany again. And again, I think if you would have said after last year or at the beginning of this season that Collinsville, Albany are going to meet in the region final, I think a lot of people had that predicted. A lot of people projected that. Obviously, Albany lost some key guys off of a state championship winning team, but they were still going to be very good. And obviously, you're the team to beat until somebody beats you. And I think a lot of people thought that this matchup was going to happen on 7 p.m. on Thursday at Iowa Park. Now the fact that Albany had to play Munster in the region semifinals was obviously interesting because that's a team from not only is a team from Collinsville's district, but that's a team obviously that Collinsville had already beaten. So if you are one of those people that likes to play the transitive property theory game, and you look and you say, well, Albany beat Munster 19-14. And Collinsville beat Munster 51-27 in the second to last game of the season. So that was about a month ago. What does that mean? And I said, and I don't know if that makes Collinsville the favorite. I don't know if you look at, well, Albany beat Collinsville last year 66-34. So we know Albany feels like they can score points on Collinsville. I will point out the 34 points that Collinsville scored was the most that Albany gave up, not only all of last year but the year before. They're the only team to do that in the last 2 years, put up that many points against Albany. So now you have a Collinsville team that knows they can score on Albany. And the fact that win over Munster literally came down almost to the last play. Munster got to the Albany 16-yard line and threw to the end zone and got intercepted. And if that interception is a touchdown, Munster probably is going to win that game 21-19, or I guess 22-19 because you probably go for the extra you probably go for the 2-point conversions just in case, so you don't lose on a field goal. But that was obviously a very interesting score. The fact that Albany was down 7-0. I think it was 7-0 at halftime or 7-6 at halftime. Obviously it's just a low scoring game, and Albany has been Albany had scored at least 40 points in 7 straight games before last week, and so that was just a really shocking result that Munster was able to play them that close. So you have all that going on in this matchup of, so is Collinsville more confident knowing that Albany struggled with Munster? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Does Albany not worry about the fact that they struggled with Munster because they beat Collinsville last year as bad as they did, winning by 32 points? Does any of that matter in a matchup where these teams obviously kind of know what the other one's going to do? Obviously, you have Albany as the defending champ, so that adds a little bit to it as well. And obviously, like I said, you have this group with Collinsville that if you would have told them that this was the setup, they were like, yes, this is exactly what we want. We want the revenge factor. We want to do what we were unable to get done last year when we thought we had a really good team, and they did. This is going to be our year. And I don't think there's any reason for them not to think that. Obviously, last year, winning the 12 games that they did coming into this matchup set a school record. They've matched that. So if they win, they're going to set a school record for wins. If they get to number 13, if they get to the state semifinals, it would be for the second time, and it would be the first since 2000. The winner of this game is going to play the Clarendon Sunray winner. And I don't think either side is even concerned with any of that. I think this is another really, really good game. I think this is another one of those games at the lower levels that everybody is excited to see. I think it's one of those, everybody, you kind of, when you look at the records at this point, obviously everybody's, really good. And some people have the name, just kind of looking at the pairings for all the region finals. You have a matchup that's 13-0 and 9-4, and you say, well, okay, but the team that's 9-4 is Allen. So obviously that's going to get people's attention. Obviously, like I said, when you have a Gunner Jacksboro matchup, which is 13-0 versus 13-0, I would, I hate to say it, that's kind of rare. I'm going through the bracket right now. There's no 6A matchups that are like that are undefeateds. There's nothing in 5A that's got that. There's nothing in 4A. Winsboro and Malakoff. So Pottsboro people paying attention to that. In 3A Division 1 is 12-0 versus 13-0. So that's an undefeated matchup. And then you have Jacksboro and Gunner, and then Mart and Lovelady, which is a potential, which is on the other side of the bracket in 2A Division 2. So there's only 3 matchups in the whole state that are undefeated versus undefeated. And then this is one of the rare ones too, with Albany being 13-0 and Collinsville only having the one loss. At the lower levels, you see 10-3 versus 11-2 and 12-1 versus 11-2. So there's a lot of stuff at stake when you're looking at this, and so I don't even know if you would say if the winner of this game is favored. I haven't really looked obviously ahead. I'm looking at Clarendon's 10-3 and Sunrise 11-2. So does the winner of Albany Collinsville, are they the favorite to make it to the championship game? But I think this is that when you have rematches like this deep in the playoffs, I can say this for from a Denison perspective, Lovejoy is still playing They have a rematch against South Oak Cliff, which obviously is the 2-time defending champions. That's a huge game that people are looking at in 5A. There's always matchups where you look at whether it's just name recognition or history. Gilmer's playing Carthage in 4A Division 2. That's going to get people's attention. The Paradise Brock rematch, which we've talked about with Whitesboro in the playoffs, we knew that was a potential to happen. That I'm sure that's going to have people's attention just because of that. So there's always games in there you kind of look and you say, that's an interesting one. And I hate to say too, because obviously we're at the point where people are playing on all different days, and a lot of the bigger schools are playing on Saturday. Especially at the 6A, out of all the 6A games that are left, all of them are on Saturday in 6A except they're on Saturday except for one that's on a Friday. 5A is a little more on a Friday, but there's if you want to look, I'm going through right now too. There is only there's only 4 games on Thursday night. They're all at the lower level, obviously, because you're getting to the point where you want to line up where you need to play when the state championship game is. But there are only 3 other games besides Albany and Collinsville being played on Thursday night. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on those 4 games. One, because who's involved. Almost all of the 2A Division 1 games are on. 3 of the 4 are on the Thursday, and then Collinsville's the only one in 2A Division 2. So there's going to be a lot of attention played on that because of the fact that it's the defending champion and it's a rematch from the state quarterfinals last year. There's a lot to and obviously you have a Collinsville team out for revenge. With all their offense. Can they find a way to get this done? I think they can. I think going into last year, I didn't really know what to expect with this lineup. Obviously, last year it was Albany, because this is the 3rd straight year that Albany has been to this point, and they were the team with the experience. They had the team with all the guys back for their senior year, and obviously they went and won a state championship. And I think a lot of people were picking Albany to do that based off of the year before. And Collinsville was the newbie. They were 4-6 the year before, weren't even in the playoffs. They were all sophomores. And then this junior year was just going amazingly well. To go 9-1 in the regular season, to win an undefeated district title, whatever they did in the playoffs was gravy. Whether they won whether they won 1 game or 2 games, or got as far as they did making the region final, it was also about, hey, all these guys are coming back. How good is this team going to be next year when this is what they went from 4-6 to this? So in hindsight, it's a team that went from 4-6 to 12-2. All these guys are back. We expect big things, and so going into this matchup last year, I don't want to say I didn't know what to. You never know, because you get to this point, everybody's good. And so you don't know until you see it happening. And I wouldn't have said I think Collinsville has a good chance last year just because of those factors in a couple of those areas. But the fact that Albany did not play well against Munster, either that's a huge wake-up call, and they've been being told every minute since that happened, if you play like that against Collinsville, you're going to lose. If you want to defend your title, you can't do that again. That was your mulligan. You survived, and you got 3 games left. So you better make them count. You can't do that again. I don't know if that's a good sign, if it's a good sign or a bad sign, but we're gonna find out. And either way, I think somebody really good is gonna lose. I think the winner of this has a really good shot to play for a championship. And I would love to see Gunner and Collinsville find a way to, not only win this week, but if they're fortunate enough to win their games next week, be able to play on the same day in AT&T Stadium, which I know we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but obviously for planning purposes, when you get to this point, you kind of look and see, okay, what does that mean? And we could have another one of those Grayson County days, if we did get to that point to where Collinsville would play at 11 o'clock on Thursday, December 14th, and to start the day, and there'd be the Division 1 game, 3A Division 1 game in the middle, and then Gunner would play at 7 o'clock that Thursday night. So it wouldn't be the true doubleheader like we had with Pottsboro and Gunner a couple years ago, but I mean, that would just be a fun day for everybody to come out, be able to watch Collinsville in a point having its best season, win or lose in that game, and then of course to have Gunner trying to go for back-to-back titles in what would probably be a really good game as well. So obviously I think that we have a good chance. Now if they both lose, it could happen. It could happen because that's the way the playoffs go. You get to this point, and if you lose, you're losing to somebody really good. And there's only 8 teams left. Nobody's bad, and that's what makes it so great. That's what makes the win so great, and that's what makes it, like I said, Gunner, Jacksboro, those two teams have been rolling, undefeated, both of them. Somebody's gonna lose this game. That's just the way it is. That's the way the bracket is. If it's Gunner Canadian, again, both of those teams can probably look and say, if we win this game, we're probably going to win the whole thing. That's the way it's been 3 of the last 4 years. The winner of that game has won the state championship. And so I think that's what makes it great. And so we'll find out. And I hope we have to do a podcast next week where we're talking about, Gunner Canadian part 1,000,000, and we're talking about Collinsville versus whoever they end up getting, and just the best season in school history is going to continue for another week, and they're playing for a chance to play at Cowboy Stadium. So that's where we're at. Again, we're going to keep doing this till the last team is left. We will do a preview of that game, and then we will, of course, recap that game in particular and the season as a whole, and what will be in store off-season wise, maybe realignment. We'll get some more information from the UIL about conference cutoffs and divisional cutoffs for football. Maybe by the time we talk next, if not for sure, definitely by the time we do the final podcast, we'll have some of that information. So we'll touch on that as well. And so that's where we're at. So again, thank you for tuning in to the podcast. Wherever you're going for these games, whether you're going to Denton to watch Gunner, whether you're going out to Iowa Park, making that long trip on Thursday night, please be safe going to the games. Thursday, you might want to dress warm, and you might want to dress for some rainy weather, depending on how that's coming in. I know Thursday's supposed to be some weather. That may be a factor too. I didn't even mention that, and I probably should have. Just because it's so far to the west, it may not be a factor. But that obviously could be an issue. And enjoy it, because we're guaranteed 2 of these left. After that, we're week to week, and we've only got 2 games left that we know of, and that's what we're going to see on Thursday and Friday with Collinsville and Gunner. So again, thanks for tuning into the podcast. Again, you can follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Jason Del Rosa, for updates on everything local with the high school sports scene. Volleyball's officially over with Gunner finishing as the runner-up there. And basketball is in full swing now that Thanksgiving's over. We're going to get into some tournaments, and then district play for basketball right around the corner, literally like 2 weeks away for some people, which is crazy to think. So we'll get into all that stuff, now that football's starting to wind down. But enjoy these last couple games, and we will see you next time here on the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.